Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I've really enjoyed the last few talks. And it's almost like we all collaborated because I'm definitely building on what these ladies have just said. So Victoria talked about working with the feminine ways, and that's very much part of my talk as well. And Tong with the improbable founder. I'm a founder as well, just not of a startup. It's a venture fund, but it's very much a startup. We started it earlier this year, and quickly my background before I have been in Silicon Valley for the last 10 years, but I'm originally from West Texas. I definitely grew up thinking the only way that you're successful is if you're a doctor or a lawyer. I had no idea what innovation was or startups until I had finished a master's in biochem. I was pre-med, obviously, because that's all I knew, and was a PhD dropout. I went the research route rather than the medicine route. And then I had heard of this company called Impossible Foods through, basically this was before it had launched. And so I, through the biochem sort of program, they had connected me. So I was really fortunate to become an early employee there where I worked for 6 years. And that's where I learned, I was like, what does a disruptive technology mean? And all of that. What does a seed stage mean? So now I'm very much in it. Was a very great experience, and I love the early stage startups. Just really felt like I can help companies. And then I saw women's health companies here and there, but didn't know about Fem Tech for a while. That term wasn't even coined until 2016. And so now I'm investing in it. I think I realized that gender equality is one of the most important problems that I can make an impact on. And it's definitely also like really intersectional with sustainability and other humanist issues. So I do have some slides that I'll share, and I have a few notes I'll be reading from, so pardon me. So my talk is about investing with a feminist lens. And so we have come a long way today as women. The Fortune 500 number of women CEOs is at a all-time high of 41, and that's 8% of the Fortune 500s, and it is on the rise. It's been a record year of women-led companies going public. And the dollar amount of VC funding raised by female founders is also increasing, and proportion of venture capital investors increased as well, with women check writers representing 13.3% of all check writers. Again, they're not always rising to the top, but it's a start. But even if it's not obvious from those numbers that I just read, we have a very long way to go. So a lot of you probably heard of the pay gap. Women are earning 82 cents for every dollar a man is earning. The equity gap is lower though. Women are being granted 47 cents of equity for every dollar a man is earning. And that VC funding that I mentioned, that's only about 2% of all the VC funding going out to female founders, and co-founders is a little bit better, but not very good. Women also spend more time doing unpaid work, less likely to have an orgasm in a heterosexual encounter, and are more often the victims of sex crimes. There's a lot of health inequities as well. Male animal models are the default because females have this annoying thing called a hormone cycle, which actually banned us from clinical trials for a very long time, with lots of adverse reactions to medications and vaccines. Another example there's a whole list of these, but another example is that the origins of OB-GYN ties to slavery, and a lot of the practices today are not actually beneficial for women. So there's a lack of innovation and investment in women's health, and women basically just get treated like we're little men. So our investment thesis is that women should feel less pain, and women have an equal right to pleasure. But as we saw with WAP and the video released, women's right to pleasure is super controversial. Females did feel like really empowered when this came out, and I feel like they came out of the woodwork wanting to share and express sexuality without being necessarily sexualized. And you could see, on the other hand, before this song, there was a feeling of repression. And it came with a major backlash as well. I don't know if y'all saw this, but there was a lot of politicians that were really offended by it. And it just showed me that women's right to pleasure is also very political. And it's not new that men are trying to control women's bodies. So this just also emphasizes that the personal is political. But dialing back, we're women in tech, so we're not necessarily here to talk about politics or what we should be protesting. We want to use our skills to innovate. And so I'm going to tell you more about the actual women's health innovation ecosystem, some of the challenges and what we can do together, whether you're working in women's health or peripherally or whatever. So first of all, we mentioned the fundraising barrier. Hims and Hers is a perfect example of some of the challenges because Hims was started in 2017 as erectile dysfunction and hair loss for men. They didn't launch Hers until 2018 after raising a $50 million Series B. So the question is, if Hims was born a Hers, could they have raised this level of funding? With venture capital still being really male dominated, you can imagine how that pitch could go. And it's really important to have more women at the table on both sides so that somebody doesn't get uncomfortable in the room with the word vagina. And so Coyote Ventures is working on this, and there's actually 8 other venture capital funds launched in the last few years that have a women's health specific thesis. But it doesn't stop with just the fundraising challenge. Women's health companies have to work harder to advertise to their potential customers. So inequitable ad policies allow ED campaigns to easily advertise, while women's health companies get incorrectly flagged as adult content and banned. So Dame infamously launched a lawsuit against the New York MTA, bringing this inequity to the mainstream. And they weren't the only ones to have problems with the MTA. Thinks and Unbound also were rejected. The problem doesn't stop at the MTA. Actually, Facebook and Google have the same policies. And so these women's health brands have to find other like non-traditional means to advertise. But on the contrary, objectification of women is the norm in these advertisements, and these explicit images had no problem going mainstream. But here's a few examples of ads that were banned. Here's a lube that helps with vaginal dryness, a physical therapy company helping with labor and delivery, and a product that helps women that suffer from painful sex. So this shows that today's business policies reflect a broader cultural norm in which women's sexual pleasure is devalued compared to men's, and women's bodies are taboo. And a lot of you coming from STEM as well know that this is also very male dominated. So the Consumer Electronics Show actually retracted an innovation award given to this robotic vibrator for women. This reward was returned after a lot of backlash, and the company is doing really well. Partnerships also remain a challenge. So Andrea Barca, who has spoken at this conference before, I believe, wrote about her challenge finding a banking partner. And this is a sexual education platform called O School, but it got flagged as porn. Thankfully, there's extending policies and Fem Tech innovations here as well. So Fem Tech investing is exploding, and Coyote Ventures is part of this ecosystem. I made this graph, and this isn't reflective of the entire ecosystem, but this is early stage rounds in the last 2 years. So as you can see, fertility and maternal health have had a much easier time fundraising than a lot of these other really critical problems to women's health. And women, we're more than having babies. It's part of our lives. It's the part that men understand maybe the most easily. But there's so much more to it. Women suffer from heart attacks differently than men, and there's very little innovation in cardiovascular innovations for women, for example. So the point is that we're here to invest in some of these other places that need innovation. And if you're interested in getting involved, we actually have a white paper on this, so you can check out our website and see how else you want to get involved, and feel free to reach out. And if not, there's still a few more things that you can do. One important thing we can do is move beyond the taboo. So when you go to the bathroom with a tampon, are you like hiding it up your sleeve or tucking away in your purse? If you own a vibrator, is that like hidden away in the bottom drawer, like wrapped in a shirt? And are you uncomfortable talking about aging, or if you or someone at work is having a hot flash at work and suffering? So bringing women's health and wellness into the mainstream conversation is how we break these taboos. So beyond talking about periods and sex, I want us to start practicing the values that we are born with. And this also goes back to Victoria's point as well. So there's values that are patriarchal, and then there's values that are feminine. And it's not about men versus women. Like she said as well, men that practice feminine values are actually super successful and respected. Whereas women are kind of forced into this patriarchal value system, and it's like hurting us in our collaboration. So some of the feminine values include collaboration, relationship building, and systems thinking. And so I ask you today, one thing you can do to bring forward these values in your daily lives and work. And I have a book recommendation here at the bottom. It's called Pussy. I know, kind of explicit, but it talks about this more. Really great book that I recommend. This is Audre Lorde. And so in our daily lives, we might need more resources to stay connected to these feminine values. And Audre Lorde's essay on uses of the erotic really ties this in for me in my daily life. So Audre Lorde defines the erotic as the measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. And the function of the erotic is to encourage excellence. So also recommend that you Google this essay. There's actually a video of her, or it's an audio, but it's on YouTube. You can listen to her reading it. It's very powerful. I listen to it like weekly. And if you feel you need a spirit animal to guide you down this path, consider the coyote. Dogs are obedient and domesticated. Wolves forebode and act alone. Coyotes are packs, and they walk a fine line between domestication and complete wildness. They are resilient and adaptive, playful yet wise, like us as women. Thank you.